Hi everyone, in this video I'll tell you about some of the best known works of literature from Asia. Asia is the largest continent in size and population with the oldest civilizations, also has a very rich literary history. But what are some of the most important works of literature people read in each country? Or what is the one book people in each country have in their own house? So get yourself a cup of tea or coffee and enjoy a literary journey through Asia. By the end of this video, you will know more about Asian literature than a 4-year university degree can teach you. Okay, joking aside, let's begin. Afghanistan, with a population of nearly 40 million people, has two official languages, Persian and Pashto. The northern city of Balkh is the birthplace of 13th century poet Rumi, one of the most celebrated Persian poets of all time. Afghans also claim the Persian epic of Shahnameh as their own or want to have a shared custody of it with Iranians. But when it comes to modern novel, the most well-known novel is The Kite Runner by Afghan-American novelist Khalid Hosseini, which I have discussed here. Although written in English, the story is mostly set inside Afghanistan. In the aftermath of 9/11 and the subsequent invasion of Afghanistan by the US, the novel became a best-selling sensation. The story is about a young man whose past guilt takes him back to Afghanistan in order to redeem his mistakes. It's an incredibly emotionally charged novel and the storytelling is beautiful, although a bit too Dickensian in its characterization of the main victim. But for the local Afghans, especially the Persian speakers, the poetry of the romantic poet Hafiz Shirazi is only second to the Quran found in most people's homes, at least those people who have homes. Bahrain, with a population of less than 2 million people, is an Arab-speaking country with a strong poetry tradition. The most celebrated poet of the country is Ali al-Sharqawi, a poet and a playwright born in 1948. All his poems are about his homeland, Bahrain, its natural beauty, history, and people. When it comes to narrative literature, it's more an oral tradition than a written one. I couldn't find a novel to read, so I will give you a few interesting facts about Bahrain in literature. The ancient land of Dilmun, mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving written work of human literature, which I have discussed here, is in Bahrain. Another interesting fact is that apparently the Irish giant James Joyce has a Bahrain setting in his impossible-to-read novel Finnegan's Wake. Let me know if you have read it and can name the setting. Bangladesh has a population of nearly 140 million people, with Bengali and English as its official languages. The most well-known Bengali literary figure is Tagore, who won the Nobel Prize in 1913, the first Asian to do so. However, back then India, Bangladesh and Pakistan were one country and part of the British Empire. So today Tagore is considered one of the greatest Indians as well as one of the greatest Bengalis ever lived. He even inspired the national anthems of both countries. I discussed Tagore's writing's philosophy in previous video. He wrote poetry, fiction, plays and music. When it comes to novels, an important Bengali novel is Anandamath by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, published in the 1880s. Set during the famine of the 1770s, it tells a story of a couple separated as they flee their starving village. It's also a story of rebellion against the British East India Company. One cool thing about Bengali literature is that music and literature are very close, so some of the greatest writers are also musicians. Tagore is a good example. Internationally speaking, one of the most popular novels by a Bengali writer is A Golden Age by Tahmina Anam, which was written in English, not Bengali. The novel tells the story of Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan in 1971 and how the political shift impacted the lives of a few characters. Bhutan is a Buddhist kingdom known for its peace and tranquility and has a population of less than 1 million people. Also because it's the only country in the world that measures happiness as in gross national happiness instead of gross national product or GDP. The official language is called Dzongkha, but the country has many other languages. One of the best-known novels written by a Bhutanese author is The Circle of Karma by Kunzang Choren. It tells the story of a teenage girl who tries to navigate life in the face of Buddhist fatalism. The idea that life, for the most part, is predetermined by karma or your actions in this life and previous reincarnations. Are we really free to choose our destiny, or do we just pretend we have freedom or choices in life? The answer is never straightforward. But you get to see these important issues from the point of view of an uneducated teenage Bhutanese girl, which can give you a glimpse of the culture as well as Buddhism. Brunei, with a population of less than 500,000, is one of the richest countries in the world. Can you guess why? It's pretty simple: the liquid gold, oil. The Fisherman King by Katrina Mohed Dawood is a mix of fairy tale and real life about a man who thinks he has descended from royal family. He leaves his family and disappears for 8 years, and then he returns. The author, Katrina Dawood, studied creative writing in Manchester University in England, so she writes in English. From the reviews I've read, it's a very enjoyable novel that can also teach you about the myths and legends of Brunei. Cambodia, with a population of nearly 17 million people, has had a rough history in the 1980s when Pol Pot ruled the country. He started a systematic killing of anyone resisting his reform, taking the country back to year zero. But today the country is moving on and attracts millions of tourists to the Hindu and Buddhist temples of Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. One of the most well-known pieces of Khmer literature is the tragic tale of Tomb Thief. I have discussed this in detail in a separate video, but to give you a brief snapshot here, it's somewhat similar to Shakespeare's tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. It's a beautiful love story that ends with terrible consequences, not only for the lovers, but for the entire village and even country. Some have even blamed this story for the 1980s genocide that took place in the country. Despite some parallels, I think that's a bit of a stretch. There's a free translation online somewhere, so let me know if you want a link. China, as the most populous country with almost 1.5 billion people, has an enormously rich literary history that goes thousands of years back. It's very hard to boil down to a single novel, so I have made a video talking about 10 of the best novels the country has produced in the span of many centuries. But if you have to pick a single novel, my pick would be a toss-up between The Dream of the Red Chamber, The Journey to the West, or The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. All three are classic novels of extreme importance in China. A more recent novelist whom I absolutely love is Yu Hua, whose novel Chronicle of a Blood Merchant I reviewed here. Chinese literature is so rich that my top 10 novels barely scratch the surface, but a good place to know what novels are important in China. East Timor is a very young country with 1.3 million people that got its independence from Indonesia in 1999. When it comes to literature, the culture is much more oral than written. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any novel from the country, so please suggest it if you have read one. India, as the second most populous country on earth with almost 1.4 billion people, has also an immensely rich literature that dates back to thousands of years. The most important work of Indian literature is the epic of Mahabharata, the longest poem in the entire world with 100,000 couplets, written some 2,000 years ago. The other important epic is the Ramayana, also written in Sanskrit, the ancient Indian language. I've not read either of them, but they are on my list. Another Indian author constantly mentioned to me here is Prem Chand, born in 1880 and died in 1936, who pioneered Hindustani literature by writing novels in both Hindi and Urdu that dealt with social issues such as religious and class divide in the subcontinent. Here on this channel, I discussed the contemporary novel The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, published in 2008. Of course, it's not comparable with those epics, but it's one of my favorite novels of all time. It's incredibly funny, deep, and also really insightful. The story is about a poor man who becomes rich not by working hard, but through some sinister acts, almost resembling Dostoevsky's Raskolnikov. I should clarify, the novel was written in English, so perhaps it's not the most representative of Indian literature, but it certainly is an enjoyable novel. Indonesia, as the largest Muslim country, has a population of 270 million people scattered on thousands of islands. I reviewed one of the most well-known Indonesian novels translated into English. Beauty is a Wound by Eka Kurniawan tells the story of Indonesia during its independence as it battles with the colonial Dutch history, but mainly with the Japanese occupation during the 1940s. It blends myths, legends, and the brutal reality of life for a beautiful woman who has become a prostitute. It has elements of magical realism with a clever premise of a woman who wakes up from death to tell a story. A country as large as Indonesia has a rich literary heritage. Man Tiger is another great novel from Indonesia. Iran has a population of almost 84 million people, but a fascinating literary history. While poetry has been the most important literary form, in recent decades, Iranian writers have written some of the best-known novels in the world. Here, I've discussed one of the most important books of Persian literature. Shahnameh by Ferdowsi is like the Persian Bible. Written about 1,000 years ago, it's familiar to almost everyone in Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, as well as non-Persian speakers like Turkey and Central Asia. It tells the story of the Iranian people from the first man until the Islamic conquest in 650 AD. But if you want to read a shorter piece, you cannot miss one of the most famous yet the most original novel ever written in Persian. The Blind Owl by Sadiq Hidayat, published in the 1930s, is one of the most terrifying novels you will ever read. If you're too scared, I have a video discussing its plot and main themes, but it is one of my favorite novels of all time. It's only about 100 pages long. Before you read, I should warn you, do not read it if you feel a little fragile. Iraq, with a population of 40 million people, is the cradle of Mesopotamian civilization. The oldest surviving piece of literature is the Epic of Gilgamesh, was written in Akkadian language, an old Semitic language, and set in the city of Uruk in Iraq. I have reviewed the book here if you like to watch. It tells the story of Gilgamesh, a king in search of immortality. A more modern tale is a novel that has created a lot of buzz in the past few years. Published in 2013, Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmad Sadawi tells the story of a man who, after losing a friend in a bomb blast, just like the original Victor Frankenstein, stitches human body parts to make a person, so the government gives him a proper burial. But just like Frankenstein, his new creation escapes the lab and soon terrorizes the city. So it's a modern retelling of the original Frankenstein monster, which I have discussed here in great detail. So this modern Frankenstein represents the ethnic religious diversity of the country patched together under a nation called Iraq. Iraq is divided along ethnic and religious lines with Shia, Sunni, Kurds, Assyrians, Yazidis, and Turkmens. So the novel plays with that. Israel has a population of 8 million people. On this channel, I discuss an Israeli bestseller, Sapiens by Yuval Harari. But it's not a work of fiction. One of the most celebrated Israeli writers is David Grossman. His 2008 novel, To the End of the Land, tells the story of a mother whose son is enlisted to fight in Gaza, Palestine. To cope with the pain of having a son in the front line, she goes for a walk, during which her story and her friend's past unravels for the reader. The novel depicts the cost of war on the individual, how families cope with the devastation that wars cause. Another great Israeli novel is The Tale of Love and Darkness by Amos Oz. Someone on Instagram also suggested A Pigeon and a Boy by Mir Shalev. Japan, with a population of 126 million people, has a very long literary tradition. One of the most important works of world literature was actually written by a Japanese woman about 1,000 years ago. I've discussed the tale of Genji here a lot. It is considered the world's first novel as it tells the story of a playboy prince whose various relationships with many women are chronicled in the book. The novel is also deeply psychological when it comes to love for men and women. Modern Japanese literature is also very rich, so it's very difficult for me to pick one. I've made a video talking about 10 of the best known novels written in the past 100 years. Jordan has a population of 10 million people and speaks Arabic. Before I tell you about the best novel, I should say that a lot of Jordanian literature is dominated by authors who were born in Palestine. But here I wanted to find a novel by a Jordanian author. After a lot of research, I found one novel that has been selected as perhaps the best Jordanian novel. Published in 1987, Columns of Foam by Ilyas Farooq was selected as part of the 100 best Arabic novels of the 20th century by Arab Writers Union. But unfortunately, it's not available in English. I should say one thing about the author. Ilyas Farooq, born in 1948 and passed away in 2020, studied philosophy and psychology, so it's my kind of a writer. Kuwait has a population of about 4 million people and speaks Arabic. Al-Sabilian by Ismail Fahd Ismail was shortlisted for the 2017 International Prize for Arabic Fiction. Here's what the organization has to say about the novel. Al-Sabiliat explores the reason behind the existence of a green artery in the midst of a vast wasteland in Iraq following the longest war of the 20th century between Iraq and Iran. Iraqi forces blocked the entry points of the tributary rivers and streams of the Shatt al-Arab River. This prevented water flowing to the forests of palm trees situated on the western side. Years passed and palms dried up, no longer bearing fruit. Eventually, all the trees, vegetation, and fruit died apart from one green strip of land stretching from the Shatt to the edge of the desert to the west, in an area called Al-Sabiliat. One old woman is responsible for this green lifeline, which supplies the village and the soldiers living in it. I really want to read it. I hope someone translates it into English. Kyrgyzstan, a mountainous Central Asian country, has a population of about 6 million people and speaks Kyrgyz, a Turkic language. The national epic of Kyrgyzstan is the Epic of Manas, which has about 500 verses, perhaps the longest poem. The story centers around the heroic deeds of Manas and his descendants who fight against the Chinese, the Afghans, as well as other Turkic tribes such as the Uyghurs. The first written version appeared in Persian in 1790s. However, the story itself might be very old, dating back 1,000 years ago. It has been translated into many languages, including English. It's an incredibly important work of world literature, so I'm very keen to get a copy someday. One of the most important literary figures in Kyrgyzstan in modern time has been Chingiz Aytmatov, whose 1980 novel, The Day Lasts More Than 100 Years, has a hint of Faulkner As I Lay Dying, in which a man recounts his story as he tries to bury his friend. Aytmatov mostly wrote in Russian, but also in Kyrgyz. Laos has a population of about 7 million people and speaks Lao. As a Buddhist country, the literature is influenced by Buddhist scriptures. One of the most important works of Laotian literature is the epic of Tao Hung Tao Chung. It tells the story of Tao Hung, the hero of epic who conquered many lands, and even after his death, he continues in his conquest by using ghost soldiers. I think that's pretty clever because death should not stop you from achieving your goals. Life is short, but who says you can't continue your mission after you die? Another important poem is the Epic of Sang Sin Se, which also has a Buddhist message that untamed desires always leads to suffering. The first modern novel in Lao is The Sacred Buddha Image by Somchen Jin, published in 1944 with some French influence. Again, it's a detective story about searching for a missing Buddha image. Lebanon has a population of about 7 million people of mixed ethnicity and religion. On this channel, I read a novel by a Lebanese French author. Does that count? I hope so. Samarkand by Amin Malouf was published in French in 1988. It tells the story of one of the greatest Persian poets and scientist Omar Khayyam in his book Rubaiyat. It takes you back to the 12th century Persia as well as 20th century Europe and America, as it follows the movement of the manuscript of the poem. I enjoyed it very much, partly because I absolutely love Omar Khayyam, but I cannot ignore one of the most influential books by the Lebanese-born author. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, published in 1923, has been one of the best-selling books of all time. It's a philosophical meditation on life, its many facets such as love, family, happiness, suffering, death, and much more. Let me know if you want me to discuss it here. Malaysia, with 32 million people who speak Malay, Chinese, and English. Malaysian literature historically has been around the tradition of hikayat, which in Arabic means story, mostly about kings and heroes and some Muslims and some not. Here I discuss The Garden of Evening Mists by Tan Tuan Eng. It's set in the 1940s during World War II when the Japanese were occupying Malaysia. But the narrative centers on a single Japanese man who happens to be a former gardener of the Japanese emperor, but now finds himself in Malaysia. It's narrated by a Chinese-Malaysian woman who experienced Japanese imprisonment but later finds herself in love with a Japanese garden. The story is beautiful, but the narrator was a bit annoying for me, but it's still a great novel. Maldives has a population of nearly 500,000 people and speaks Maldivian language. The country is known for its beautiful beaches and tranquility, so much so that thousands of people from around the world save money to spend a few days there. I said this before, when you're happy, you're happy. Good writing comes from a place of sadness. Also, the Maldives has other problems to deal with. The country is slowly sinking as the sea level is rising. There is no time to write. Someone on YouTube suggested Don Hiala and Alif Fulhu. This is the Maldivian version of Romeo and Juliet, in which the romance between a boy and a girl is interrupted when the most powerful man in the land, the king, falls in love with a girl. Now it's up to the boy to outsmart the king. But it's a tragic tale that also involves a jellyfish. Great love stories always involve poison. Mongolia is a vast country with a tiny 3 million people who speak Mongolian. The most important work of literature in Mongolia is the Sacred History of Mongols, written in 13th century. It tells the story of the greatest Mongol of all time, Temujin, who grew up to become Genghis Khan, who conquered half of the world to create one of the largest empires in human history. The story starts from his childhood all the way to his conquest of Central Asia, Persia, Arabia, and more. The book is not just a great story about the man himself, it's also an important book of history. So not only Mongolians who revere it, it's also read by scholars who want to learn about the history of that period. It has been translated into English a few times. A modern novel, The Blue Sky by Galsan Chinak, tells the story of a nomadic Mongolian family that falls apart due to modernization as younger generations abandon their traditional lifestyle to receive education, while the older generations die. The story focuses on a young shepherd boy who witnesses all these changes, and the final nail in the coffin is the death of his dog, who used to shield him and his flock from the fierce wolves of Central Asian steppes. The cold wind whispers as he hugs his utter loneliness. It's a beautiful novel that captures the harsh life of being a real nomad, not some rich Western dudes calling themselves digital nomads. Myanmar, with a population of 54 million people, speaks Burmese and some other languages. The most famous Burmese writer is George Orwell, who wrote Burmese Days, a fictionalized story of the British colonial authority, as well as his own experience of working as a police officer in Burma in the 1920s. However, a best-known book by a Burmese writer is 13 Carat Diamond and Other Stories, a collection of short stories published in 1955 by King Myo Chit. It is considered an important work of Burmese literature. A more recent work is The Road to Wanting, a novel by the American Burmese novelist Wendy Lau Yon. It tells the story of a girl who, while seeking a better life, ends up facing nothing but disappointments. This was longlisted for the Orange Prize in Fiction in 2011. Nepal, with a population of 29 million people, sits at the top of the world. One of the most famous stories in Nepal is Muna Madan by Lakshmi Parasad Devkota, published in 1936. Devkota is perhaps the greatest Nepali writer of all time. It tells a tragic tale of a married couple, Muna and Madan. Muna travels to Tibet on business to make money, despite his wife begging him not to go. While in Tibet, he is mesmerized by how beautiful Lhasa is, so he gets distracted and spends far longer than he had intended. It's like you go to a pub for one drink, then end up getting hammered. On his way back, he gets sick and the message gets to his wife that he has passed away. Here's the tragic twist. This misinformation causes huge grief in the family, resulting in the death of both his mother and wife. When Muna finally arrives home, he has nobody left to see. It's not a happy story, but it has an important message. Do not chase money. Instead, appreciate and spend more time with your loved ones. North Korea has a population of 25 million people. There are numerous novels written by North Koreans abroad, but if you want to read a novel that is widely read and popular among the North Koreans themselves, then the 1951 novella Jackals by Han Soria, considered the most famous North Korean work of fiction. It is a story of a Korean boy killed by Christian missionaries with a lethal injection, therefore plays with the anti-American sentiment in the country. So much so that in fact in North Korea, jackals is a derogatory term for Americans. Oman is a Middle Eastern country with about 5 million people. The most famous Omani novel is Celestial Bodies by Joha Al-Harthi, which tells the story of three sisters and their different marriages. The novel also tells the recent history of Oman and weaves tradition, history, and how the old lingers as the new emerges. The novel has been widely praised and has won many awards, including the Man Booker Prize in 2019. Pakistan, with a population of 220 million people, has its official language Urdu, with many people also speak and write in English. In fact, I reviewed a Pakistani novel written in English, The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Mohsin Hamid. It's a fantastic novel that deals with the recent history of Islamic fundamentalism among young people in the West, juxtaposing religious fundamentalism with market fundamentalism. It's really short novella and also extremely well written, and the plot is very unique and funny at times. It's highly recommended. But for the Pakistanis, the poet Allama Iqbal is like the national hero, whose poetry in Urdu is read by nearly everyone in Pakistan. He lived between 1877 and 1938. He also wrote in English, Persian, Punjabi, and is widely respected in Iran. Interesting to know that he was influenced by Nietzsche and Bergson, two philosophers I really like. Palestine has a population of about 5 million people. Hands down, the best Palestinian novel is Men in the Sun by Ghassan Kanafani, which I have reviewed here. It's a really short novel with such a heartbreaking story of Palestinian refugees in Iraq trying to cross the border to Kuwait, where work opportunities are far better. It is so beautiful, poetic, and the characters so alive that it has become one of my favorite novels. If you have to read one novel from Middle East, read Men in the Sun. The Philippines, with a population of 110 million people, has a rich literary tradition. I dedicated a video talking about 4 books by Filipino authors. But if you have to pick one, the most important work of Filipino literature is the 1887 novel Noli Me Tangere by Jose Rizal. This novel is so important in the country that some people think it inspired the country to claim its independence from Spanish rule. The author, Jose Rizal, after the publication of this novel, was arrested and executed by the Spanish colonial authority. Today he is considered not just as the forefather of literature, but also a national hero. The story centers around a young wealthy man who, upon return from study abroad, gets entangled in the local politics and corruption of the colonial authority as well as the Catholic Church, and how they exploit the poor. It's a heartbreaking tale. Qatar, with a population of nearly 3 million people, is about to host Football World Cup this year. How about literature? Abdul Aziz Al Mahmoud 2011 novel Al-Kursan has been translated into English as The Corsair. It is set in the 19th century Persian Gulf when the British were ruling the region and fighting the Wahhabis and the pirates to make the passage of goods easy. But the story also involves an important sword, a fierce Arab pirate, and a lot of drama. It gives you a glimpse of the region during the 19th century. Saudi Arabia has 35 million people and is the largest country in the Middle East. The most important book from Saudi Arabia is, of course, the Quran. It's a combination of many genres. On the one hand, it's a legal document, a religious doctrine, and moral teachings, but on the other hand, it's also a book of stories and beautifully poetic. It's written sometime in the 7th century and has inspired generations of Arab and Muslim writers ever since. For a major Saudi work of modern fiction, the 1984 novel Cities of Salt by Abdurrahman Munif is considered one of the best novels. It tells the story of how the discovery of oil disrupted the lives of communities and villages, which also coincided with the arrival of the Americans and the pipelines. There's a saying that when a dam is built, it sinks a village. The same is true here. The discovery of oil benefited those from outside, but not the people whose sense of community was forever changed. I'm talking about the villages, not the country as a whole. Singapore has a population of about 6 million people of mixed ethnicity with Chinese, Malay, and Tamils. On this channel, I discussed 3 stories from Singapore. State of Emergency by Jeremy Tiang tells the story of Singapore in its early days when 2 powerful forces were battling each other. On the one hand, we have the communists inspired by the Chinese and Russian revolutions, who believe in equality and rescuing those at the bottom of socioeconomic hierarchy. But on the other hand, we have a more traditional Confucian ideology of strict meritocracy. As these two forces battle, the Confucians win and brutally suppress the Marxists. The story is about a family torn apart during these struggles. It's a really great novel to learn about how Singapore became what it is today, a Confucian utopia of promoting meritocracy and hierarchy. Now, from Confucianism to Buddhism. South Korea has 51 million people. A while back I made a video talking about a few works of Korean literature. Some are very old and some quite recent. But the one that made the most impact on me was an oldie. The Cloud Dream of the Nine by Kim Mang-joon was published in 1687, therefore considered the first Korean novel. It is also the first Korean novel to be translated into English. The novel has a very simple premise. What if you had everything you wished for? Big house, lots of women, lots of money, most prestigious job, and lots of power. Would you be happy? Of course, it's a deeply Buddhist story revolving around the idea that the fulfillment of your desires doesn't make you happy. It's a really deeply philosophical novel about the nature of human existence. Korea at the time had two different yet somewhat opposing religious doctrines. On the one hand, Confucianism promoted meritocracy, competition, and hard work, while Buddhism would say, what is the point? So this novel transforms a Confucian character into a Buddhist character at the end. It also has some good discussion of Taoism. But most crucially, it tells a story of how Koreans and Chinese are Confucian at a young age, and when they get old, they turn to Buddhism. Sri Lanka, a country of 21 million people, speaks predominantly Sinhalese and Tamil. Michael Ondaatje is perhaps the most well-known Sri Lankan-born novelist, whose 1992 novel, The English Patient, is his most popular one. The novel has nothing to do with Sri Lanka, as it's set in Italy during World War II, as the injured men tell their stories prior to the war and their involvement in the war. A more recent novel by a Sri Lankan-born author, Naomi Munawira, is Island of Thousand Mirrors, which tells the story of civil war in Sri Lanka between the majority Buddhist Sinhalese and the minority Muslim Tamils in the north. The war and its devastation are mainly seen through the experience of women. Syria, with 17 million people, has Arabic as its official language. One of the most successful Syrian novelists was Olfat Libi, who depicted the city of Damascus in most of her novels. One of her best-known novels is Damascus, The Smile of Sadness, which depicts the story of a girl growing up in the city in the first half of the 20th century, when the French ruled Syria. It tells the story of tradition and change, common themes in most novels of this period, such as the Cairo trilogy by Najib Mahfouz in Egypt. Unfortunately, her novels are not translated into English. Syria has been in the news in the past few years, so there are a lot of novels written about the war by Syrians as well as non-Syrians. Taiwan has 23 million people and the official language is Chinese. The Stolen Bicycle by Wu Mingyi is a beautiful novel about loss and memory. It tells the story of a bicycle, but it's actually the story of a father who disappeared around the same time as the bicycle. Tajikistan has a population of about 10 million people. The official language is Tajik, which is a variety of Persian. As a result, Iranian literature has been very influential in Tajikistan. Some of the best-known Persian poets were from or lived in what's today Tajikistan. For example, the poet Rodaki, who lived during the 8th century, is said to be the first writer who wrote in modern Persian. The most important Tajik writer was Sadruddin Aini, who lived between 1878 and 1954. In 1927, he wrote the first Tajik novel titled Dekunda. There is no English translation available, unfortunately. Thailand, a country with around 70 million people, has a very rich literary history. The Indian epic of Ramayana has been very influential due to the spread of Hinduism and Buddhism throughout the region. One of the most important works of classic literature in Thailand is the epic of Khun Chang Khun Phain. It tells the story of an army general with special magical power who's involved in a love triangle. It has been praised for its realism as well as having ordinary people as main characters. A more recent novel by a Thai author is the 1981 novel The Judgment by Chart Korbejiti. was named the Book of the Year in Thailand. It tells the story of a young man whose future prospect as a monk looks bright, but he has to return home to look after his father, who has married another woman. When the father dies, people start spreading all kinds of rumors which get into his head, and things go south for the young man. It's a brilliant psychological novel about the power of other people over an individual. Turkmenistan, with around 6 million people, has a Turkmen as its official language. The most famous writer from Turkmenistan is Berdi Karbabayev, who was born in 1894 and died in 1974, and was mainly writing during the Soviet era. He translated the works of Pushkin, Lermontov, Tolstoy, Gogol into Turkmen, but also wrote poetry and novels about the lives of ordinary people and workers. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any of his works in English. A Russian novella set in Turkmenistan called Soul or Jan by Andrei Platonov, published in 1935, is a fantastic story about a group of nomadic outcasts who own nothing but their soul as they migrate between places. This story has a very deep existentialist theme of what is the purpose of it all. The United Arab Emirates has a population of about 9 million souls who mostly speak Arabic, but also a huge immigrant population of those who have a lot of money and those who have very little money. Perhaps home to the tallest building in the world as well as the shortest building in the world. The richest and the poorest. Emirati literature is mostly in the form of poetry. The only novel I found to be in English was The Sandfish, a novel from Dubai by Maha Gargash, a West educated who critiques the country's tradition of keeping women trapped. The story as a whole is pretty predictable and nothing groundbreaking. All women as victims and all men bad. But it does give you a glimpse of how it is like to be an Arab woman in the UAE. Uzbekistan is a Central Asian country with 33 million people, also the country that Borat hates the most because of its neighboring Kazakhstan. Uzbek is a Turkic language closely related to Kazakh, Turkmen, Turkish, and Azeri. One of the most important writers in Uzbekistan was Abdullah Kadiri, who was born in 1894 and tragically executed by Stalin regime in 1938. His influence on Central Asian literature is immense. His 1922 book, Days Gone By, is considered the first novel in Uzbek language. A contemporary Uzbek novelist is Hamid Ismailov, who works for the BBC. His novel, The Railway, depicts a small town in Uzbekistan which used to be on the Silk Road and now has a train station. Similar to The Bridge on the Drina by Ivo Andrić, this station stands witness to many characters coming and going, just like the old Silk Road era. Ali Shehnavai is a 14th century poet who lived during the Timurid Empire in Herat, modern-day Afghanistan, but his poetry revived the Chagatai Turkic language closely related to modern-day Uzbek. Vietnam has a population of about 97 million people who mostly speak Vietnamese. One of the most important works of Vietnamese literature is The Tale of Keo, which was published sometime in the 1820s. It's a story nearly every Vietnamese knows or has read in school. It tells the story of a talented young girl, a musician, singer who falls victim to circumstance when her family faces financial problems. She is sold to prostitution, then sham marriages, all sacrifices she accepts to rescue her family. There's a happy ending though. At the end she survives it all, but at a cost. I have discussed this in great detail here, so you can watch it later. Yemen has a population of about 30 million people. While most eyes are on Ukraine, the country is suffering from a terrible war. I would say much worse than Ukraine. One of the first works of Yemeni literature is They Die Strangers by Muhammad Abdul Wali, published in 1971 and translated into English in 2006. Although he was born in Ethiopia, he called Yemen home. Another important Yemeni novel is Hostage by Zaid Moti Damaj, published in 1984. It is listed in the top 100 Arabic novels of the 20th century. It's about a boy who's given away as a hostage to make sure the family stays loyal to the rulers or the imams. It's a short novella. A few countries that are partly in Asia and partly in Europe, like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Russia, Kazakhstan, Cyprus, Georgia, I covered in my video on European literature, which you can watch here next. Also, next stop is Africa, so send your recommendations. Thank you for watching.